Okay, so today we're going to talk about audience. So we have our audience down here. Um, I don't think that this is going to be too different than, I think a lot of it's going to be familiar to you since you had to discuss audience and thinking about readers and all that and how you're presenting to them back when you did your English 101. A little different that we'll talk about context of use briefly in here, but I think a lot of the information and how you look at it is going to be very similar. So kind of just going through this and what we're going to do with it afterwards we'll talk about. So one of the first things is we're going to talk about the audience as profiling the readers, right? What do we mean by profiling? Good, bad? Why do we need it? That sort of thing. So obviously, profiling your readers can sound like a negative thing. Profiling has some negative connotations to it, but it is also necessary when we're talking about in this context of making any kind of document. So using the term document, I know that you're probably like me and you tend to think of a piece of paper in your hand. Somebody says the word document and you think someone's going to hand you some paper. Still in like tech comm, the technical communication field, they're still using the term document for the most part. They keep trying to come up with other terms, but and eventually they'll land on something that goes across the whole field. Most of the books still use the term document, but document can mean anything. Anything that presents information that's that's not an essay usually, but that's not an academic essay. But even an academic essay is a document. But in here, we're talking outside of academics. But it can be a piece of paper. It can be in the form of an essay. It can be in the form of like a proposal or a grant. It can be on paper. It can be purely electronic, which is what a large portion of our communications go through now. So even when we talk about memos and letters and proposals and that kind of documentation, half of it or most of it, if not, is no longer actually in a physical form, right? But it's still a document. It's still considered a document. A recipe is a document, even if it's never touched a piece of paper in its existence, right? It was typed on Pinterest. You found it on Pinterest. You read it on Pinterest. And you made your fajitas by looking at your iPad while on Pinterest. So it was still considered in tech comm terms as a document. Maybe it was a poster board, maybe it was a flyer, maybe it was an advertisement in a magazine, or maybe it was a movie advertisement, maybe it was a screenplay. All those things are considered quote unquote documents, all right? PowerPoints. This presentation you're watching right now is a document. I think the word that we also use a lot in the field is artifact, but that feels very weird to say to students, even though in my job we actually use the term artifact to each other all the time, and my boss will use the term artifact to us and say, make sure that you have all the artifacts up in the Teams project, because we had to just recently do something where we all had to contribute artifacts, and we'll talk about artifacts and all that kind of thing. It makes it sound like we're going to Egypt on an ancient dig site or something and pulling out artifacts, but it's just a different way to try to refer to some kind of information that we had gathered and put together that may or may not have been an actual document. So I feel that probably eventually they'll come up with a different word. They do sometimes use the word artifact, but we will just use the word document right now because that's what the last several textbooks still use. All right, so what do we mean by profiling? We mean that when we're going to make some kind of document in whatever form it may be for an audience, we need to know who that audience is. We need to know information about that audience, or it fails, right? In whatever form that might be. You need to know your target group, right? What you need to know who they are, you need to know why they need it, right? Whatever that might be. Ooh, that went way too far, sorry. I messed up my thing. Okay, so let me get zeroed in here. So developing a reader profile, right? It looks like finding a rhetorical situation. You're asking yourself questions, all right? And the answers to these questions end up kind of filling in a reader profile sheet. So who are your main readers? Who is this main audience, right? Like the audience sitting in this pretend theater thing we have going on here. Who are they, right? Who is this main group that you're targeting? What do they need? What is it they need from whatever it is that you're trying to give them, or get them to look at, or get them to buy, or get them to read, or get them to understand, or get them to vote for, or get them to give money to? Because documents always have a purpose, right? When you're writing essays, academic essays, they'll have a purpose within the essay, and the overall purpose is for the creating the document is that you need to for the class. When you're talking about technical communication documents, their purpose is outside of the document. It's like they have, besides if you did it for a class, but if you're out in the world outside of a classroom, the documents themselves have a purpose. It's like you're trying to document some kind of an incident that happened at work. You're trying to make sure that you're covered for insurance. You're trying to get somebody to put money into a project. You're trying to get a business off the ground. You're trying to sell something. You're trying to put facts together for a scientific project. So it's like the documents themselves have their own purpose, right? So what is that? And what do the people that are reading it need? So that helps you understand how to formulate your discussion for that group, right? Because if you don't understand what your readers need, it's going to be very difficult for you to reach them. And you may use the wrong language, you may use the wrong terminology, you may say a whole bunch of stuff that they don't care about, therefore you're going to miss the mark, right? Where will they be reading it? So that may sound like a weird question. So let me give you a scenario. If any of you have ever had a leak in your house, let's say one of your sinks leaks. If you've ever had a faucet leak or something like that, it's not fun. It's not a pretty thing. So if you have instructions or directions for how to fix that faucet leak or put in a new faucet, where are you usually going to be when you are reading those directions? You're probably not going to be sitting outside sipping lemonade, right? Why would you do that? Who cares about reading it while you're outside? Usually you're going to read how to fix a leak while you are fixing the leak, right? So where are you likely to be then? You're likely to be around the sink or under the sink. So you have to think about where are they going to be likely to be reading this. If they're going to be under the sink, do you want to use super thin paper and super tiny print? Probably not, because that's going to be extremely difficult to work with if you're stuck under the sink. You'll probably want to make sure it's very big writing and very big pictures, and maybe even if you can, use thick paper, maybe even a light gloss paper, because it might get wet, right? If they're under their heads under the sink trying to fix a leak, it might get wet. Same with your reading computer, instructions, quick fix computer instructions. Where are you going to be? You're going to be at your desk. You probably have good light, so that's okay. You might be able to get away with smaller print and instructions. So you have to think about who are they, and are you going to assume that they're tech savvy? Are you going to assume that they know what it means to say, plug the hard drive into the blah, blah, blah. And it's like, what if they're like, well, what does the hard drive look like? What is a hard drive? So you need to be specific, right? So you need to think about things like, where will they be? What information do they need? When will they be reading this? You know, day, night, you know, in an emergency situation, right? Why will they be reading it? Will they be reading it in emergency situations? Think about those pieces of emergency instructions that are on the fire. I can't even talk today. I'm sorry. Wow. The fire extinguisher. It's like I used to be paranoid that if it came down to it and there was a fire, I would never be able to figure out how to work the fire extinguisher in time, because the new ones have all these safety measures on them, like a pin you have to pull out and do this and that and that. So I've read the instructions ahead of time. And I was glad that I did, because there's like 3 things you have to do before you can actually pick it up and spray it, which who knew, right? Because on TV, they just pick them up and spray it, but you can't, at least all the ones we have in our house, you can't just pick it up and spray it. You have to do like a couple of steps first. And those couple of steps are written on a red and yellow tab hanging off of it, which is great, except I'm not sure that I'd want to have to read it in an emergency. But at least it's red and yellow, it sticks out really far, and it is in big print, so I will give them credit for that. So why will they be reading? I didn't mean to write that twice. Why will they be reading? How will they be reading? So you need to think about what's their situation. Are they going to be outside? Are they going to be inside? What is their situation? Are they going to be in a hurry? Are they going to have a lot of time? What is the likely reading level of the person that you're targeting? Is it something with toys? Is it something that somebody, you know, in a low reading grade level is going to be able to handle? Or is this something that's a higher level piece? What kind of a document is it? Are these directions? This can go on forever, so I'm not going to keep doing that. But you see what I'm saying? It's really, really important to understand what the purpose of your document is and how are you going to reach your reader, right? That's like a whole different thing. Right. So when you develop a reader profile, you're going to think about a few things, okay? Thinking about a few things. So this makes it a lot different than writing essays. Sorry, I needed a drink of coffee there. So you want to use the following guidelines. Readers are raters of information. And that is true of all of us. We're information raters, especially now. We're so used to having so much information at our fingertips that we tend to not read it all, right? And we tend to kind of open up big documents or big pages of information, Googling stuff all the time and doing this bit, going down. Okay, this is what I want, right? I mean, how many times have you Googled something or, you know, looked up something on, you know, online and just kind of perused your finger down the document or down the page or down the website, whatever, until you found what you wanted? Did you read the entire thing? Probably not. I mean, maybe a couple of you did, but most of us usually will just kind of rate it for the information we want, okay? Sometimes they'll call that information mining and information rating, okay? Information miners, information raters. It's what we do because now we have so much access to so much information. So when you know that, it means you want to kind of cull away all the extra garbage and make sure you're really just sticking to what they need and pushing away the extra stuff when you already know that this is what readers do. All right? Readers are wholly responsible for interpreting your text. So I'm sure some of you have already had the unfortunate incident happen of somebody misinterpreting an email or a text message or a Facebook or Twitter post somewhere where you said one thing and somebody took it a totally different way, than what you intended. You were trying to be funny, they took it as you being mean, or you were trying to be nice and they took it as you being rude, and it's just something, right? Just one misplaced comma or different word that has a couple of different ways it could be taken in context, right? And that's when we talk about that whole idea of connotation, right? And somebody has misinterpreted what you're saying. So you're not standing there to be able to say, no, that's not what I meant. Nor do you even have the ability to come back in a text message or an email or reposting something. For the most part, once you have a document printed and it's out there, right? Which most of you have already probably had that experience in many different cases. Once it's out there, it's out there. And even though you may be able to say one thing to somebody, one person off to the side and be like, I'm sorry, that's not what I meant. Depending on how hurt their feelings are, that train may have left the station and your email or text message or post is now, fodder for all sorts of people to judge you on what you have written. So you want to make sure that what you say is clear, all right? Your clarity and precision becomes very important here, which I think I said down here, right? Concise, very concise. And a lot of people wrote that about at the beginning about, their different possible jobs that you will go on to and how important this was. Absolutely. And part of that is because of the precision and conciseness and clarity, right? You're going to be measuring things that will create, furniture or businesses or buildings if you're going into architecture or construction or, anything of that mode or mechanical engineering. You have to be precise. Going into anything in the medical field, you have to be clear, right? People's lives depend on all of this stuff. So your documentation and what you say and what you write has to be specific and clear and precise, right? Readers want the need to know information. All the other fluff around it, the extra information that maybe you think is neat, all right? Or, oh yeah, I should also tell you, or, oh, there's this other cool bit of information. Leave it off, because you just need to get down to brass tacks and the need to know only. All the other stuff will come later. It doesn't need to be there. You don't want to overwhelm with all this information in most cases in your documentation. Readers prefer documents with graphics and effective page design. I felt like I had to put a graphic there since I just said that, but this is not a very useful graphic. So graphics and effective page design we'll talk about later. We get to that later where we really get into more design issues. But yeah, that definitely becomes an important element in this whole thing, because without good design and effective design, it's messy and people don't like it. And it could cost you. It could actually cost you. It could cost you jobs. So, you don't want that to be a factor. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how to... No. Okay, about how to put together a writer-centered analysis chart, as this is actually the homework I usually assign for this particular unit. Let's kind of go over this. There's two different charts that come through in this unit, but I usually only assign this chart, but we'll talk about both of them because they do go together. The other one's a lot harder it asks for a lot more guessing and more than what we're going to do initially. Something that you'll have to think about later in the semester as we get closer to your own proposal. But for right now, we're going to think about the writer-centered analysis chart, okay? So that means when it's writer-centered, you start with the person that's creating the document, whatever that document is, and you move outward. who is the writer, who created this document, whatever it is, whether it's a set of instructions, whether it's an advertisement, whether it's a commercial, whatever. So in the case of what I usually assign for this, it's usually an advertisement. So who has created this advertisement? Who's the advertisement creator? And who is the primary, when you're thinking, like when you become the writer for whatever document you're making, then you go here. You're making your own writer analysis chart. If you're making a document, you become the writer, you're here, and you have to ask yourself, who is the primary target audience that this is for, right? Who are you making this document for? Who is the main person that this document's information is meant to go to? All right, so whatever that is, whether we're writing something that's like a scientific report, or we're creating a set of instructions, or you are doing some kind of an advertisement, whatever that is, who is the primary audience you're meant to write towards? And we have to consider, and this is why there's a writer center analysis chart, you do have to consider secondary, tertiary, and gatekeepers, but most especially the secondary. The tertiary and gatekeepers are out here also, but your primary is always there. But it's these groups that can get you in trouble. Your primary group is your main focus always, because if you fail with your primary group, your document has failed, right? Whatever that is. But there are these other groups out there, right, that can be troublesome. Although I hate to, it may not be the best example, but to kind of give you a real world example to kind of keep it closer to home, if you are going to make, let's say, a Facebook post, so that makes you the writer because you're posting, and you really wanted a few people to know what a great weekend you had, and you were going to post some pictures and write a quick piece about what you did over the weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So you post that. You have a primary audience in mind. Your primary audience is really, usually on Facebook, despite how many people you may have stuck on there with you, there's usually a core group of people that you're often talking to the most. All right? There's usually a core group that you're talking to the most. So let's say your core group is some of your closer friends and maybe a relative or two that you are like, hey, look what I did this weekend. It was a lot of fun. Here's what we did, blah, 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 blah. And you have some pictures for it. So that's your primary group. You think that they'll enjoy the pictures. And you think that they'll think it was great that you went and did all this stuff over the weekend. That's your primary group. What you didn't think about was the secondary group, or maybe you did think about the secondary group of all those other people that are out there on your Facebook group that maybe you thought, haha, they didn't think I'd get to go do that, and I did. So too bad for them, and maybe they'll be jealous because they didn't get to go. So maybe you did think about that secondary group. I don't know. So there is another group out there, the group that you were not targeting, but that is still in your Facebook post group, right? Your Facebook group of friends that are going to see it anyways, right? Kind of those watchers off to the side. Now, how they may or may not react to it, whether or not you did or didn't think about that, that's important. You should think about that. Now, there may be a tertiary group that may be off to the side too. Usually the secondary group is, you want to watch for them and consider that, but there's also this tertiary group that may be not as friendly to you. A tertiary group can often be competitors, somebody off to the side, somebody looking from a legal perspective, blah, blah, blah. What if in your tertiary group you forgot that your boss's nephew's best friend is on your friends group or something, and because you had such a great wild weekend, you called in sick on Monday. So you posted all this stuff and then you called in sick, and your boss's niece's friend saw it or something like that, and then told your boss finds out because you didn't think about how linked up all that was. And then your boss is like, really? You called in sick? How was your weekend? And you're like, oh crap. Because you're not sick. You're just tired because you were really, really busy all weekend having a lot of fun. So sometimes we don't think about these other groups and other possibilities that get hold of the information that were not part of our primary group, right? Emails are the same way. You write an email to a specific person, but emails have a way of getting forwarded, don't they? That happens to me all the time. I send somebody an email, it's about something specific. The next thing I know, my email is attached to another email that goes to another person. It comes back to me because I had asked a question, and then they asked the other person the question and attached my email to it. I hate that when people attach my email and send it on to another email. So I try to keep that in mind every time I write an email at work. These were work emails. So your emails and your texts and everything, those things become permanent documents, right? So that's just kind of keeping it at a personal level. So we'll talk about these things here in just a second. Okay. So what do I mean? The writer. You are the writer, right? In most cases. Now, when I ask you guys to do the homework, you're not the writer, but you can pretend you're the writer. The primary readers are the action takers, the person you're making the document for, the people, the group that you're asking to do something, whether that is to look at what you've done, like the vacation thing, or to buy something, or to invest in something, or to do the recipe, or to, whatever it is that your document is doing. So that's what the primary readers do. The secondary readers, they often call those the advisors. These are the people who advise the primary readers. In workspaces, it's like engineers, technicians, lawyers, doctors. They're kind of the people on the fringes that will often look at this primary document and go, some of this is wrong. I wouldn't take that at face value. No, that doesn't look correct. And they're kind of looking at this document for flaws or to say that it's really well done, right? So you have kind of like this an overseeing group. That's why I'm like, there's that other group, that's that secondary group in the background that also is seeing what you're putting up there. The tertiary group are the evaluators, often evaluators of the writer, the team, or the company, like news reporters, lawyers, auditors, activists, etc., making sure that everything is as it should be. But can often be the ones that are looking for something to be off or inappropriate. All right. So you have to be always aware of what you're saying when you're putting documents out there. The gatekeepers are usually supervisors, the people who need to look over your document before you send it out. Now, when we're just writing on our own and we're sending, we're doing Facebook posts, we don't have gatekeepers unless you have somebody that looks at your stuff with you, or if you have a best friend who reads your stuff as soon as you post it and says, oh, that's not going to go over well, you better take it down, and you do, then you do have a gatekeeper. But if that's not how that works, then usually we don't have gatekeepers except for in our own minds when we're posting on a daily basis or something. But in workspaces, we do. We do. It's like usually somebody's looking over documents before it goes out, an editor or something like that. So that's kind of how that works, okay? It would be the person's boss to make sure that everything was in order before it went out, if it needed to have that done before it went somewhere. Okay, so that's how the reader analysis chart initially works when you're doing the writer-centered piece. Initially, this is just for you to first figure out who are my primary, secondary, tertiary readers. All right. Sometimes it's not so important for you to know exactly who the secondary and tertiary readers are, just knowing that they're there. But knowing your primary readers is key. You have to know that. You have to know who that's going to be. So the other document that I don't assign as often, and I am not going to assign this time likely, is the actual reader analysis chart. But I did still want to show it to you so you can kind of think about it as we're going forward. Once you have, mainly because it asks for information that becomes too lost in the weeds with the secondary, tertiary, and gatekeepers. But for your primaries, you do want to think about this as we go forward. So this is a big piece of what people do when they're thinking about creating these bigger documents. Once you've realized and you know who your primary audience is, you think about what are their needs, values, and attitudes. So what does that even mean? So their needs is the information that they need to take action or make a decision. So I mean, that's kind of a common, well, I would hope that it would be kind of a common sense thing of what you would need to put in your document so that your reader can do what they need to do, right? They need to accomplish it. For example, if you are going to create a set of instructions, you need to be able to give them all the steps so that they could finish the complete steps, right? To finish whatever it is you've asked them to do, whether it was installing something, putting something together, setting up a playlist. But if it's incomplete, then you have failed this, right? So you need to make sure that they have all the information they need. So you need to understand what are their needs going to be to accomplish whatever it is you're asking them to do. Their values, issues, goals, or beliefs that the readers feel are important. So it depends on what it is that your document is. That it's important to understand both values and attitudes kind of crisscross each other, right? Values are those issues, goals, and beliefs. Attitudes are the reader's emotional response to you, your project, or your company. Both of these things are of emotional value to your readers. But it's important to know where that is and where they may stand and how they may be affected by your document, because it's going to help your document be more successful in both your primary and your secondary, tertiary, right? Because this is where documents can become offensive if you don't take that into consideration. This is where you can have ethical problems and legal problems if you don't think about that. It's also where it could just be a total, crash of a useless document if you don't think about that, right? You want it to be something that is useful. You want it to be something that speaks to your intended main audience. So you want to think about what would be important to that audience, right? Which is why you need to know your audience. Your audience is very important. Let me back up a little bit. So the whole thing with the audience, thinking about the place, thinking about the timing, thinking about who's there and who it's important to, it always is going to depend on what it is. When I first did put this slide piece together here, I thought about the fact that they're sitting in a movie theater, and that the last time I went to the movies is that you're stuck in the theater, right? And I went with several people, and we all commented on this. Is we're stuck in the theater, you're trapped in there, and they start showing you commercials, right? Before you start getting the previews, they're throwing commercials at you. And if any of you have been to the movies recently, I think they've actually always done this, like throughout time. It's just that they're getting really good at it, because it used to not even affect me the way that it did the last time. The last time I went, I did get something to drink, but I didn't get something to eat because I knew I was going to eat after the movie. But the commercial is the whole entire screen is filled up, right? And they have that commercial, which I don't know that they even say anything. It's just the whole screen fills up with buttery popcorn. It's the sound of popcorn. You watch all the popcorn fill up. It's making the popcorn sounds, and the whole screen fills up. And then all the ice fills up the screen. It makes that tinkling of the ice sound, and then you hear the crack of like a pop opening up, and then the whole screen fills up with soda and you hear all the fizzing and stuff of soda. It made me really thirsty and want some popcorn, which is weird. I mean, I actually already had a drink and I didn't get something to eat because I didn't want anything, but suddenly I wanted popcorn. So they knew their audience. They had a captive audience. They knew you were going to be stuck there for the next couple of hours watching the movie. And if you didn't already have something to eat or drink, you still had time to get up and go get something. So you're all sitting there watching this food and drink coming across the screen. They knew their audience. It was good. It was good advertising. And had I really wanted to get up and get it, I guess I would have, but I stuck it out and I didn't. I had an icy, so I was okay. But they knew their audience. So you have to know your audience. What do they want? Where are they at? Because we were captive audience, right? If I would have been in line at the supermarket or something, I wouldn't have cared. But I was in the movie theater and it sounded really good. So keep that in mind as you're filling out, doing the homework for this week, because it is going to be for an advertisement. Who is the intended primary audience meant to be? Adults, children, teens? Is there a specific ethnic group that they're targeting? A specific age group that they're targeting? A specific class that they're targeting? Right? Because sometimes that's a thing. It's like if it's all about diamonds or something, it's like they're certainly not talking to me because I'm not going to be able to go buy a bunch of diamonds for Valentine's Day. I don't think so. So clearly, where are they? Who are they targeting? Right? Who are they trying to get to? Now, if it's on sale at Walmart, then maybe they're talking to me. So it's like different people, different groups, different areas. Who are they targeting? Is that the primary group? And that doesn't mean that it's only for that group. They're also going to try to keep it open enough to be inclusive of secondary groups, right? But they clearly are going to have a primary group that they're going to target and be thinking about those, what that group may want. And how did they do that? So just some stuff to think about as we kind of go forward in this, that you have to think about those things as we move along in technical documentation.